Tonight's chaos just detonated inside Trump world, and the fallout is brutal. A judge didn't just slap Trump with a fine. He ordered him to cough up hundreds of millions immediately. No delays, no deals, no escape. And witnesses say Trump collapsed, slumping in his chair as the ruling hit like a wrecking ball, exposing the truth behind his empire and triggering absolute meltdown inside his inner circle. His power, his wealth, his entire image is crumbling in real time. And now prosecutors are openly warning, if he stalls even once, prison is on the table. Stay right here, because what comes next is even worse.
Tonight, a crushing blow to the Trump family's real estate empire. A judge in New York handing down a more than $350 million civil penalty against Donald Trump, plus interest, for lying about his wealth for financial gain, barring him from obtaining loans in the state for 3 years, banning Mr. Trump's adult sons from running any company for 2 years, ordering they pay more than $4 million each.
Today, justice has been served. Today, we prove that no one is above the law.
Tonight, we watch something that almost never happens in American life. A man who spent decades selling himself as untouchable, as too rich and too powerful for the rules, finally ran into a courtroom where the numbers, the documents, and the law caught up with him. A New York judge didn't just slap Donald Trump on the wrist. He laid out in painstaking detail how Trump built key parts of his empire on fraud, and then ordered him to pay back hundreds of millions of dollars for it. This isn't just some random civil judgment in the background of politics. This goes to the core of the story Trump has told about himself, and the story he's been selling to his supporters. I'm a billionaire. I'm a winner. I'm the guy who always outsmarts the system. Well, the system just answered back, and for once, it didn't back down. What the judge did here was more than just attach a giant dollar sign to Trump's name. He said essentially, you lied. You lied to banks, you lied to insurers, you lied to the institutions that keep our financial system running, and you made hundreds of millions of dollars off those lies. You don't get to keep the profits from that. You're going to return them. That's what disgorgement means. It's not a random fine. It's a demand that you give back the money you gained by breaking the rules everyone else has to follow.
No matter how rich, powerful, or politically connected you are, everyone must play by the same rules.
Attorney General Letitia James with the best day of her year, maybe her entire tenure in office, with this big win on a very big case, the penalty she just won against defendant Trump.
So let's break down what this actually was. This wasn't about a one-off mistake on some complicated spreadsheet. The case laid out a pattern. Trump repeatedly inflated the value of his properties when he wanted loans and better terms. Then he turned around and deflated those same properties when it was time to pay taxes. When he needed to look rich, his assets magically ballooned. When he needed to look poorer to avoid obligations, they suddenly shrank. That's not savvy. That's not aggressive accounting. That's deception. And here's why that matters for you and me. If you apply for a mortgage and lie about your income, that's loan fraud. If you lie on your taxes about what you earn or what you own, that's tax fraud. Regular people don't get to send in fantasy numbers and then argue about it later. They get penalties. They get their credit wrecked. In serious cases, they get prosecuted. For decades, Trump operated in a different world where his net worth was basically whatever he said it was. And banks went along because they thought they could make money off the image. The judgment blows a hole in that image. The court looked at the documents, heard the experts, and said, no, this wasn't harmless exaggeration. This was systematic fraud. The roughly $360+ million he's been ordered to pay back isn't some made-up number for political effect. It's the calculated benefit he gained from lying. Plus interest. That's the legal system saying you don't get to profit from the lie forever. But the money is only part of the story, and in some ways, not even the most damaging part. The judge didn't stop at disgorgement. He stepped into Trump's business life in a way that almost never happens for someone this prominent. Trump is barred from running New York companies for years. His adult sons are temporarily banned from executive roles too. And there's a court-appointed monitor watching the Trump organization's major financial moves. That is an extraordinary level of oversight. That kind of restriction is reserved for situations where the court believes that, if it walks away and just trusts the person to behave, more harm will be done. It says the judge didn't just see a past pattern of fraud. He saw a risk of continued misconduct unless the legal system puts someone else in the driver's seat. And there's another piece, the threat of jail. In this case, the judge made it very clear that non-compliance, stalling, hiding assets, or trying to play games with this judgment isn't going to be treated like a negotiation tactic. It's going to be treated as contempt. When a court orders you to pay, to disclose, to stop certain behavior, and you openly defy that, jail becomes a real possibility. Think about how upside down that is compared to the story Trump likes to tell. He spent years calling other people thugs and criminals, talking about law and order, and promising he alone stands for justice. Yet here we are, with a detailed ruling that says he systematically lied for money, and a judge spelling out that if he doesn't follow the law like everyone else, he could face incarceration. That's not some cable news insult. That's legal reality. Now, people will ask, will he really pay? Will they really enforce it? The answer is that the mechanisms are already built into the system. If he doesn't pay, if he claims he can't pay, there are tools, asset seizures, liens, forced sales. That's how our system treats people who owe large judgments and refuse to cooperate. It's ugly, it's public, and it's humiliating. And that's exactly why Trump has always tried to stay a step ahead of courts and creditors. He hates looking weak more than almost anything. This is where the stakes get even bigger than Trump himself, because this case is a stress test for the idea that no one is above the law. It's easy to say that when you're talking about some mid-level official or a nameless white-collar defendant. It's a lot harder when you're talking about a former president who still controls a major political party, commands media attention on demand, and has millions of people convinced he's their last line of defense against a corrupt system. That's the through line of everything we're watching. Do our institutions have the courage to hold that person accountable the way they would anybody else who did the same thing? Or do we quietly carve out an exception because the politics are too messy, the backlash is too loud, and the power imbalance feels too overwhelming? We also can't ignore the pattern in Trump's life. This case fits into a long line of stories. Small contractors who say they were never paid for their work. Students who signed up for Trump University and walked away with worthless promises. A charitable foundation that was shut down after allegations the money wasn't being used properly. Again and again, the story is the same. Squeeze everything you can out of the system. Then fight like hell when anyone tries to hold you to the fine print. For most people, if you stiff your suppliers, if you mislead your customers, if you play games with charitable money, your world gets very small very fast. You lose reputations, licenses, sometimes your freedom. Trump's world, for a long time, got bigger. He leveraged that persona into television, into branding, ultimately into the presidency. A fraud wasn't just financial. It was political. The myth of the brilliant businessman became the sales pitch for giving him governmental power. So when a court finally lays out, point by point, how that myth was built on cooked numbers, it's not just a financial story. It's a democratic one. It tells us something about how easily we confuse celebrity with competence, wealth with wisdom, and marketing with truth. And it challenges us to decide whether we're going to learn from that or fall for it all over again. There's another key group watching this very closely. Republican donors and power brokers. A lot of them held their noses for years, calculating that if Trump could deliver tax cuts, deregulatory policies, and conservative judges, they could live with the chaos. But now the chaos comes with price tags that may land directly on Trump's properties and his wallet. Every dollar raised that goes to legal fees is a dollar that doesn't go to competitive races, organizing, or turning out voters. Some of those donors are starting to ask hard questions. How much is this movement about policy, and how much is it about keeping one man out of financial ruin and legal jeopardy? When your leader is spending more time in courtrooms than in communities, when his legal needs overshadow the party's message, you start to see cracks in the facade of invincibility. And here's where the disinformation machine kicks in. Right-wing media will tell you this is all a witch hunt, that this is just Democrats weaponizing the justice system. They won't spend much time on the evidence, the emails, the appraisals, the wildly inconsistent valuations, the testimony from insiders. They'll focus instead on the headlines they can spin. The party affiliation of the Attorney General, the judge's past decisions, any slip-up or stray quote they can turn into proof of bias. But that's why it's so important to go back to the basics. What was Trump actually accused of? Did he do those things? What did the evidence show? Did he inflate his asset values on paper to secure better terms, then deflate them when the tax bill came around? Did he send financial statements that bore no resemblance to reality? Those questions have answers in the record, and courts, more than one, have taken a hard look and said, yes, this was fraud. If you care about democracy, that matters. Because democracies don't just fall when someone cancels elections. They erode when people stop believing that rules apply to everyone. When they see elites get caught lying and then watch nothing happen. Cynicism becomes the default. People check out. They say they're all corrupt, which is exactly the environment a would-be strongman wants. If everyone else looks just as bad, his corruption feels normal, even justified. That's why this ruling is bigger than Trump's bank account. It's a signal to him, to other wealthy players, to political actors, that playing games with the truth in pursuit of profit can have real consequences. Not every time, not in every case, but sometimes when a determined prosecutor and a serious judge stay focused, the system can still push back. Is it perfect? Of course not. There will be appeals. There will be new rulings. Some penalties might get adjusted. That's how the law works. It grinds, it revisits, it sometimes corrects itself. But the idea that every action taken against Trump is illegitimate, just because it's Trump on the receiving end, is itself profoundly anti-democratic. The rule of law means you are judged on what you did, not on how loud your supporters can shout. For people who still believe in him, none of this will be easy. They've been told for years that he's the victim, that he's a martyr for their cause, that every courtroom defeat is actually proof of his righteousness. That propaganda is powerful. It gives people a way to avoid uncomfortable facts. It lets them stay in a story where their champion is always right, and any institution that challenges him is automatically wrong. But for the rest of us, for people who are trying to keep at least one foot planted in reality, this is a moment to stay clear-eyed. A judge looked at the evidence and said Trump lied to get money and favorable treatment. That judge imposed serious consequences, financial, professional, and potentially criminal if he refuses to comply. That's what accountability looks like. It doesn't have fireworks. It has filings and footnotes and long opinions. It's not exciting. It's essential. And if we really believe no one is above the law, then that principle has to hold, even when it's politically explosive. It has to hold when the person in question has millions of voters behind him. It has to hold when he threatens institutions, attacks judges, smears prosecutors, and tries to turn his supporters against the legal system itself. If we give up on accountability because we're afraid of the backlash, then we've already surrendered the core of what a democracy is. So where does that leave us? It leaves Trump facing a judgment so large, it could shake the foundations of his business world. It leaves his brand as an unbeatable tycoon badly damaged by the very documents his own companies produced. It leaves his political movement forced to decide whether they're fighting for a vision of America or just fighting to keep one man's legal and financial troubles at bay. And it leaves the rest of us with a question we've been circling for years now. Do we actually want a country where the rules mean the same thing at the top as they do at the bottom? Because that's the heart of this. This isn't just about watching a famous man get knocked down. It's about deciding whether we're still capable of saying with a straight face that there are lines you can't cross, lies you can't tell, and money you can't steal, even if you have a gold-plated name on the building. In the end, this case will move through appeals and headlines will come and go, but the core truth won't change. In a courtroom, under oath, with evidence on the table, Donald Trump was found to have committed civil fraud on a massive scale. That's now part of the historical record. The question is whether we treat it like a turning point or just another outrage to scroll past. If we care about the rule of law, it has to be the former, because democracy isn't defended in a single dramatic moment. It's defended in slow, grinding, often frustrating processes where powerful people are finally told no and made to live with it. That's what we're seeing right now, and the world is watching to see whether America still means it when we say, no one is above the law.